that a lot of people may be familiar with you or may have heard you speak before, but I like to do a little formal introduction before we jump into our juicy topic called Where is Love Now? It's a big question in a lot of people's minds, right?
It is.
Yep. So, also known as the Love Shepherd, Larry Michel is the founder of the Institute of Genetic Energetics, a master ERP, and the host of the Love Matters podcast. He's a breakthrough relationship coach, author, trainer, speaker, and producer. As the founder and voice of the 4answers.com, he's brought to the world the only scientifically proven online compatibility system that unlocks the mysteries and reveals the true motivations behind our actions, from devastating emotional upsets to our most joyous and blissful experiences. Larry dedicates his life to creating possibility for all of us to live in courageous intimacy, in deep connectivity, and in our full loving expression. Well, that sounds really good. Before we jump in, I just want to ask you about this, Larry. When you say courageous intimacy, I love that. I love that language. What do you have in mind with that?
Oh my God.
It caught my attention.
To me, it's the place where all quality relationships have to get to. They just have to get there. There's a book that came out a number of years ago called Radical Honesty. And it's a fabulous book. And it scares the poop out of a lot of people because they think if they're going to be honest that everything's going to blow up. And one of the things that the book revealed is that most people, when they were super frightened about sharing something, being authentic and in integrity and vulnerable, that their fears were always just, they became nothing when they realized that the partner, the person they wanted to talk to, was so open to the honesty that the challenge was a small thing to overcome by comparison. And courageous intimacy, to me, is the next step up in relationships, especially with our beloveds. And intimacy is kind of one of those things that has different levels, right? So in the scientific world, it's been given up to 7 or 8 or 9 different kinds of levels of intimacy, from a handshake, which is like level 1, to the most intimate of expression, which is being super vulnerable and willing to be completely seen and also willing to be completely wrong. In other words, have your beliefs examined and amplified and shown that there's another possibility, and not be so scared or fearful that you covet them and hold them tightly, but you're open to change. And if you take that level of intimacy and you add courage to it, then you get to dive in not just with a willingness to grow, but an excitement to grow. And that's the piece that I think is really critical for any relationship to survive over time. It has to be inspiring and it has to be exciting, and there has to be growth. Because when those things are not there, it starts to get old, it gets boring, and people start looking elsewhere, or it falls apart. And so we need to be willing to be courageous, really be courageous, and at the upper level of our game of intimacy. And that's what will keep our experiences and our relationships blissful and co-creative and exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because a relationship is not going to stay stagnant. It's a living thing. It's going to be evolving in one direction or another, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if it's stagnant, it's gonna go downhill. Right? It's got to go one way. Like you said, it's got to go one way or the other. So you either have to consciously uncouple if that's where you're going, or you've got an up level. And we have to be constantly up leveling. If we're not doing that, we're not even alive, right? We stop the clock. And when you stop the clock, everything starts to falter, including our health.
True. And I love that you used the word courageous, because I think I do think it takes courage, like you said, to be vulnerable, to be willing to be wrong, to continue to evolve and grow, and to, kind of shine the light in some of those dark corners of our own lives, or being courageous enough to continue to grow and evolve ourselves as human beings, individually and within a context of a relationship. I do think that takes a lot of courage.
I think it takes a lot of courage, but it's essential. And I mean, it's simple things. Even myself and my partner, as much as I know, we still have our issues. And if she says something and I just like listen to it and then it impacts me emotionally and I don't speak to it, right? I just kind of walk away and I internalize it and I let whatever that message that I think I got boil up inside me, right? I'm holding on to it because I'm fearful of bringing it to the surface. I might be fearful of what might get uncovered if I want more clarity, right? And the reality is, it's at those moments that when we really have to like stop ourselves and go, oh, just bone up and just go have the conversation, right? Go have the conversation, and wherever it takes you is where it needs to take you. Because if you don't have it, the other direction is a catastrophe. And it always turns out being a worst case scenario. So, we need to be courageous enough to take a look at what's really upsetting us, to be honest and discerning of what's our truth. And even if we're not even certain what our truth is, to say to our beloveds, those people we care about the most, that, I'm not even 100% certain about how I feel or what I'm intending, where I'm intending to go with this conversation, but I know this is what I'm feeling right now. And I want to talk about it and let it out. And hopefully we can discover together what's going on. Right. Now, for a lot of men, they won't do that because they think that's weakness. That if they haven't got their shit together, that they have no business talking about it. Right. And for a lot of women, they're scared to death to say something to their man. Let's say it's sexual and they're not happy with an experience they had and they're scared to death to say something. They'll just go, I'll get over it. I'll be fine. I can work through this. Well, that's not fair to either one of them. Right. And the conversation is what creates deeper loving and better sex and better connection. Right. But without that conversation, we're in a story making things up. And there's nothing courageous about that. That's all fear-based. It's the opposite.
Yeah. And we start making assumptions. We start telling ourselves stories. We start thinking we know what's going on with the other person because we're afraid to ask for that clarity. I know a lot of women, in talking with a lot of women and being one myself, I know sometimes the fear is, that it's going to be too much, or they're going to reject us, or that we're going to, like you said, hear something that is going to open up a whole new can of worms or whatever. But in relationships, the truth really does set us free.
Yeah, it really does. And you know what? And it may be a rejection, but then you get to speak to the rejection. You can look deeper into that experience. And oftentimes when you speak to what you really fear the most, what comes out of it is something that's really brilliant and beautiful.
Yeah.
And this is where courageous intimacy is about being excited, truly excited to discover what is the challenge or the issue that may be coming up.
Yeah. I love that. And then the other thing that you said is in deep connectivity and in our full loving expression. So say a little bit more about those things. Well, see, these things are standing out for me. I've interviewed you many times, but these are standing out for me in a whole new way.
So deep connectivity is really getting out of your stories, right? It is. This is the place where we have to let go of judgment. We have to let go of anything that can get in the way of us truly seeing the people that we're with. Like, there's nothing more beautiful than feeling seen, right? And feeling heard. And, the number of relationships that I encounter and work with, and couples that I work with, that can turn around and say, I don't think you even know who I am, right? Or they don't feel seen, is so high It's so incredibly high. And the reality is sometimes we're still learning who we are. But the connection that we have with our partner is the piece that helps us feel safe, right? We need to know that we're being heard. We need to know that we're being seen. And when that's there, we feel safe enough to explore, right? And we feel comfortable enough to grow. We feel like we have choice as well. And, freedom and choice and safety are big ingredients for both men and women in relationship. They're essential. So that's the deep connectivity, and understanding as much as possible what gets in the way of it and how to navigate those things are critical. That's why my work in genetic energetics, Michelle, is so important. I mean, it is the most powerful tool I've ever worked with to help people connect, truly connect at a deep level without all their stories getting in the way.
Yes, and I know that your work is really powerful, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that as we go through, because I've done your quiz, your little quiz, and it was like spot on for me, spot on for my husband, spot on in terms of the combination of the two of us. And so I know that it's really a powerful part of your work, and I'm really grateful that you have that to offer to people. So speaking of genetic energetics, since you brought that up, and we are going to be talking more about it, and I know it's part of your free gift, but tell us a little bit more about the whole genetic energetics and how this can make a difference in people's lives and in their love lives.
Wow. And we have how long for this?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to give you the fastest Reader's Digest version that I possibly can. In a nutshell, what genetic energetics is, it's a system that identifies the energetic frequencies that we vibrate at. So, to make a distinction, a lot of people talk about how energy is everything, and everything is energy, and energy can be moved and displaced, and it never goes away, but it can be changed and altered. Well, in this case, we're talking about a frequency that we vibrate at that is genetically coded. It's like our blood type, and this is critically important to know. And from this understanding, from this science, we've been able to break this down into 4 powerful categories. One is how we communicate. The other is how we process information and run our life. The other is our relationship to money. Another is how we sexually engage. And I can tell you, between sex and communication, that those 2 are the most critical. The others are important as well, but how we communicate with people is essential to understand. And the reality is we don't all communicate alike, even when we're both speaking English. Most of the time, 50% of us are different than the others. So there are literally 2 different kinds of communication styles. I'm speaking in mine, the one that I know best, which is what we call structural. So I use words to mean exactly what I want to say. I don't pick a word that's just for emotion or just to create a mood. I'm picking the word very, very carefully. And if you speak to me, my inclination is going to listen to you and take you literally, right? Now, not everybody talks that way. Half the population is very what we call figurative. So they're very emotive, and their expression is far more important than the exact words. And then sometimes even words are used, and there's the assumption that the other person understands it when there's really an emotion behind the word. And if it's me, I'm listening to the word and I'm going to Webster's dictionary and going, I think I know what you said. So if any of us, in fact, all of us, have had misunderstandings with people, right? And most of the time it's because there's an assumption that they said something that we're defining based on our own abilities, right? Because that's how we're raised. I mean, we want people to talk the way we talk because it's the easiest to understand us. But that's not the way everybody talks. And so there's a requirement, if you know there's a difference, to ask a question, ask a deeper question, to feed back to someone and say, gosh, what I think I heard you say is, and they may turn around and go, no, heck no, that's not at all what I meant, right? And they're not being mean when they're saying that. It's an opportunity for clarity. right? It's like courageous intimacy. You're looking for clarity. And so if we know there's differences, we know to look for that clarity. And there's also how we experience each other energetically. Every one of us has been around someone who we thought just totally drained us of our energy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we have nickname for them. We call them energy vampires, right? It's not
Right.
a very nice nickname, but it's true, right? And there's times when we get together with someone and we really want to be with them, and then we find ourselves kind of looking around and yawning and all this kind of stuff, and we're not short on sleep. It's because the two energetic frequencies are colliding with each other and wearing each other down. So the reality, Michelle, is that we're in relationships and in engagements with people that are different from us all day long. And what we have a tendency to do is create a story saying, oh God, they're an energy vampire. I can't be around them. No, they're not. They're just different. And so if we have to or desire to spend time with someone, knowing this little bit about them, these core fundamental energetics, these genetic properties, are game changers because it allows us to do the most important thing, which is acknowledge and honor and embrace and respect the person that we're with instead of make them wrong, instead of judge them, instead of holding on to resentment or blame or shame or guilt, right? We get to let go of all those things in place of really embracing differences. And here's the best winner of all of that. The only place that love exists is when all those things are gone, right? So if you want to be in a loving environment, you can't be there with a bunch of crappy stories.
Mm-hmm.
So the short answer to genetic energetics is we all need it. And for me, who has been in coaching and therapy and psychology work since I was 14, right? It was like, that was an occupation I decided I wanted when I was 14 years old. And I've seen and worked with and done all kinds of things and used all kinds of modalities, and many of them which I still find very useful. But this one's at the core. I don't do anything without knowing the genetic energetics, and then I take all the other tools I have and work with it on top of that. Mm-hmm. But it's been a game changer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And some of the people listening will have heard me say this before, but my husband and I have a little joke because I'm definitely one of those literal people. You know, I pay attention to words, and I can say to my husband, no, you said this, you know, these exact words that he says. So my husband and I kind of have this little joke between us, and he says, if I say something and you can interpret it more than one way, and one of those ways hurt your feelings, I meant it the other way.
That's great. I love that. It's a good
and you know
strategy.
what? I believe him because I know that he has my best interests at heart, and I also understand that sometimes our communication style is not the same. Whereas I'm like a very literal person. He can be.
That's why you and I get along.
Yeah, exactly. I think about the words that I'm saying, and I hear people and I hear their literal words. Like you're saying, I'm like, no, you said this word, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's amazing. Michelle, I've had circumstances where I had two people sitting in my office at opposite ends of a sofa, insisting that neither of them expresses love for the other. And I will ask them, tell me, how do you express love? And they'll say one thing, and then I'll ask the other person to go, how do you tell them that you care for them? And they'll say something, and I hear it. I can hear the two different, it's like I'm interpreting. That was Japanese, that was German, right? And then I'll turn around and say, well, when she said this, what she was really saying is blah, blah, blah. And he'll go, that's impossible. And I'll look at her and go, is it? Isn't that what it was? She says, exactly what I was saying. And the man will go, oh my God, all this time I've been listening for something different. Right. Mm-hmm. And the same thing happens the other way around. And it is amazing to see the transformation. Two people that were sitting this far away on the sofa are now on each other's laps, and I have to send them off to a hotel. right? But
Right.
so what your husband is doing is brilliant, right? He's saying there's two meanings, and if one hurt your feeling, it wasn't that one, right?
I meant the other one.
Yeah, it's the other one. And it's an opportunity to get to know each other better too. But those, and that's just communication. I mean, when we get into the area of what we call sexual response type, it gets very complicated, but it's also profound because it identifies where relationships go wrong and what we can do to help them go right. And the reality is 95, this is a staggering statistic, 95% of the relationships where a couple are mismatched sexually, they don't succeed over time unless they know about this mismatch and they know what to do about it. They just don't. And, it's an unfortunate reality, but there's a solution. And that's the exciting part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've never really asked you about this, but is this like in harmony with like the love languages, the 5 love languages? It sounds like there's some maybe overlap here.
So it's a really great question. I think that genetic energetics, I've done a lot of studies of this because I've been into typologies and character assessments for, 4 decades, 5, 4 decades.
You started when you were 3, right?
Yeah, well, you can guess at my age. So but I've been fascinated by them, since I was young, starting with things like astrology and numerology. And so to specific to love languages, our love languages can change. Mm-hmm. So I've met many people that would say, well, my primary love language was touch, and now it's expressions, gifts, right? So I don't have the exact terminology, but it shifted, and they'll find that it shifted over time. Well, genetic energetics doesn't shift. So love languages are as a result of how you've grown up and what you've experienced, you've discovered those things that really are most powerful and most moving for you, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And those can shift. And here's the interesting thing. You take 2 people, they identify their love languages, they're really clear what those love languages are, and they really care about each other, so they want to embrace their unique elements, right? So yours is one, and hers is one, and his is another. If they have energetic qualities that are really disparaging, that are very different, it doesn't matter how much they want to embrace the different love languages, they're still going to have a challenge. Mm-hmm. So what we're looking at is how to take a variety of different pieces of information and use them to create the most enjoyable and compassionate interaction, the deepest connectivity between 2 people. Mm-hmm. So you may be into human design, you may be into Vedic astrology or Enneagrams, which are powerful. Mm-hmm. It could be gene keys, it could be Myers-Briggs, it could be wealth dynamics, it could be all of these. And underneath them all is genetic energetics. So we call it core energetics. And at the core, this is what's going on. Then take all these pieces of information, use them as well, but don't use them. And I say this even about our own work. You don't want to use a typology or any kind of system that says you are a certain way, you're an 8 or you're a 6 or you're this love language, to try and pigeonhole someone into a behavior, right? So you and I are both structural talking style. What I don't want to do is expect you to be literal. What I want to do is be aware of how you handle language. So in our interaction, I understand what I'm experiencing, right? Mm-hmm. Because you with someone else could talk very differently than you with me.
Right.
Because there's lots of other elements that are that are impacting how we interact with each other. Our beliefs, how we were raised, what we think that how we should even be talking to each other, right? Our tone, all these things are things that we've learned and established over time. That's nurturing, right? Mm-hmm. And those pieces can't be ignored. And what we want to do is be able to integrate as much information as we can to up-level the quality of our connections. I mean, that's what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there are a lot of wonderful tools out there for sure. And I
there's
think
a ton of them.
Yeah, and I think the more we understand about ourselves and the more we can understand about other people, and the deeper we can go with this kind of work, the more we can have more of those compassionate kind of interactions that you're talking about. And one book that I love a lot is the Four Agreements. In fact, I might even have a copy of it right here. I always find that maybe the hardest one for me, I don't know, they're all hard on a given day, but maybe the hardest one for me is, to not make assumptions. And I think that's kind of a part of what you're talking about. That's
why we called our website The Four Answers, by the way.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, we knew how powerful, to me, the Four Agreements is very powerful. And so when I was looking for a name for our website for genetic energetics, we called it The Four Answers because our primary typology has 4 building blocks. And they're really designed to help you embrace many different things, including the 4 agreements, right?
Well, and you know what? Even as we're talking about this, and you're talking about the importance of, no matter what tool or tools you're using, to not pigeonhole people or not to have like a certain expectation that they're going to show up in a certain way, that ties in with, all of these things we're talking about, and it ties in with the 4 agreements. And it occurs to me that as you said that, it occurs to me, the first agreement is to be impeccable with your word. And so to me, sometimes, Larry, this is where I find myself going into judgment, is if people aren't literal in the way they're speaking, sometimes to me it doesn't feel like they're being clear or impeccable with their word. And so that for me can churn up a reaction inside where I think, I don't know if this person's quite trustworthy, or I start getting like a little something going.
I totally get that. I totally get that. And I actually had to redefine what I meant by word. Right. So for you and I, impeccable with the word is like, okay, I'm opening up Webster's and it says this, right?
Right. I think I have opened up Webster's.
Yeah. I mean, what the hell else could it mean? This is what it is, right?
Right.
Or you Google search the word. And the reality is that a person's word is not always exactly the dictionary definition of the word. The word is more their intention. So, someone may say something with deep intention, and it may have completely different meaning in terms of the dictionary definition. And I mean, I think I've told the story before. You've heard me tell a story. It's so poignant, of a couple that were having this huge argument in their apartment. They were living together, and she was figurative, and right in the middle of the conversation, like it was just heated. And she goes, I've had it. We're through. This is over. We're done. Right? Now there's the words, through, done, this is over. So
yeah, we don't need a dictionary for those. We know what those mean.
we think we
right? Know what those mean.
And so
right?
the man heard them, and he's structural, and he kind of like tucks his tail, bows his head, walks down the hallway into the bedroom. And she's thinking, okay, he got it. He's like leaving for a moment because I just needed time out, kind of thing. And he went into the bedroom and started to pack.
Oh.
And she comes in 5 minutes later, thank goodness she did, to check on him. And he's packing, and she's going, what are you doing? And he said, you said we're over, this through, we're done. I assume you wanted me to leave. And what she meant, her intention was, I just don't want to argue anymore. Her through meant, I just don't want to argue anymore. We need to take a break, right? But it was an emotional onslaught of words that was intended to say, can we take a break? But that's not what she said, right? And when they had that communication, it was like, oh, thank God. Because if she came into the bedroom 15 minutes later, he would have been gone. And then she would have gone, that SOB ran out on me, right?
Right,
Left,
right.
right? And I never want to see him again, kind of thing. Fortunately, that's not what happened. And this was the starting point where they realized they really had two different forms of communication. And for their relationship to last, they had to be able to embrace that difference.
Mm-hmm.
So, impeccable with our word is sometimes the word is an emotional conveyance of an idea, of a thought, of an expression of passion or concern or anxiety, whatever it might be. And there's a high likelihood, 50% of the time, a matter of fact, that what you're going to get is not the words you think should correspond with that condition.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it also makes me think of another one of the agreements, which is to take nothing personally.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's another one that, on a given day is not the easiest thing. But as we have that deeper understanding of ourselves and others, we can, get away from some of that judgment or some of that immediate reaction to what someone does or says, and
that's
have
a very
more.
hard one. It
can be.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's one of the hardest ones for me because I'm a perfectionist, and my core wound is not feeling good enough. And so, if someone says something to me, not to take it personally is like I have to do real conscious work about that because it seems very personal, right?
Yes.
And the reality is, it may be their issue, not mine.
Yes.
And if I don't take it personally, then I have the opportunity to ask, what's coming up for you that you said that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the deeper dive into connection and courageous intimacy, to ask that question, instead of getting all upset that someone accused you or said something to you and taking it personally, to be able to stop, take a breath and go, can you help me understand, what's coming up for you that you said that? I mean, why did you make that particular comment?
Mm-hmm.
Emotionally, where is that taking you? And now we can go deeper into what the real issue might be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's done in a compassionate way, right?
Yeah.
In a loving way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad we're having this conversation because I think there's a lot to think about here. There's a lot to explore. And I love this idea of courage and truth that we're talking about, because I believe that those are some of the things that can make a difference in you having an extraordinary relationship, which I believe the people that are here, they're not spending their time or investing their time listening to our adorable faces chat, Larry.
Oh, come on. They came to look at this colorful shirt. We know that,
right? They came because they care about having extraordinary love and extraordinary lives. And so, that's a tip of the hat to the audience. But I know for a fact that the people that really tune in and really listen to these things, they're here because this is important to them.
Yeah. I think most people are looking for love, right? Mm-hmm. And this is like the title of this particular segment. What did we call it? Where is love, right?
Where is love now?
Where is love now? It's kind of a bit of a play of words, but it's also a huge juxtaposition about love. So a lot of people, most of us, me included, for years, to me, I looked at someone's behavior and based on their behavior, gauged how much they love me. Right? Mm-hmm. Or my behavior would be a gauge of how much I loved them. And I would say something like, I would comment, they would do something, and that would have me just spew out these words about love. And what ends up happening is love gets attached to particular behaviors. And the reality is that the love and the behavior are two totally different things. So in relationships and marriages and any kind of behavior, any kind of relationship, we look at the behaviors that are important to us. We look at those, the environment and the things that we need that support us to be the kind of person that we truly want to be, that we desire to be, that we enjoy being, that we're most in flow when we are, right? And Yet we bring in this word love and we paste it on top of all those behaviors like it is controlling them. It's determining their existence. And the reality is it doesn't. But as long as we're doing that, we're constantly looking for love in someone's behavior. So here's the truth about love. First of all, if you've defined it, it's not love. If you've given it some definition at all, that's no longer love. It's you're looking at something that may have happened in the past, and you had what felt like a loving experience, and so now you're looking for that same thing. It's trying to relive something that's already passed, or you're trying to construct something in the future. Both of those, past and future, don't exist right now. And so if you're in either of those places, you're not where love is, because love is only right here, right now. But let's go deeper than that. Love itself is our life force. So none of us, and I want everyone to really hear this because this is life changing. None of us is ever without love. Ever, ever, ever without love. It exists. It is what keeps us alive. It's what keeps this heart pumping. It is the energy that has us get up in the morning, take a breath, and go, I'm going to live another day. So we have love built into the fact that we're alive. Yet we then wake up in the morning and let all kinds of events and circumstances impact us, and we forget that love is underneath all this with us all the time. So now look at relationships. If you go, I'm not sure I love you anymore. Well, what you're really saying is, I'm not feeling as full and complete and healthy as I need to feel. I'm not feeling as alive as I need to feel. And because of that, my relation to you is changing. My experience with you is changing. My desire to do this and that and the other thing has changed. But it's what we're really talking about is those elements of the relationship that have changed. The love hasn't. The love is still there, but it's not fully expressed. It's not, you're not feeling as alive and full because you have challenges that are getting in the way of you just being in your complete loving self, right? Mm-hmm. So our divine being is love. We're not out there looking for it. We're looking for a quality relationship, and it looks like XYZ, whatever that might be. Whatever your quality relationship is for you, Michelle, it may be very different for me, or there may be some really cool similarities that we discover when we talk to each other about relating, right? But the love is already there. Now, that kind of changes the whole conversation, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. We don't have to look for it. I'm not looking for someone to help me love myself. I do love myself. I woke up this morning and decided to live another day. There's nothing more unconditionally loving that we can do. Mm-hmm. So instead, let's talk about the different kinds of ways that we want to interact. Let's talk about the characteristics of the way we want to live. Let's ask for what we want in terms of compassion or connectivity or language. Or understanding or being seen or heard. And let's not throw love on top of it because love is already underneath all of it. And if we're feeling truly loving, then we get to express that in an absolutely powerful, beautiful way.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I love the concept of us being beings of love, that it's already within, that it's an intrinsic part of who we are. A divine part of who we are.
Yeah, to me, it truly is our life force. It's what keeps us alive. Mm-hmm. It keeps our heart beating. Without it, we would not be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you don't have to look any further than inside to find love. Mm-hmm. And then when you tap into that, it changes your composure. Mm-hmm. It changes how we communicate. It changes how we listen. It takes us out of judgment. It takes us out of righteousness. It removes a lot of things that get in the way of us being compassionate human beings and stewards for this beautiful planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a long, deep conversation, right?
It is, and I've loved what we've talked about today. It's been really, really fun to have this conversation with you. I always love speaking with you, and this is definitely maybe my favorite conversation so far. Even after all these conversations, I just loved what we talked about and what you shared today. Just because I think it is a big conversation and there is so much depth to it. And again, we've still only scratched the surface, but I think the things that have been brought forward have been really powerful.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for your work and for your presence and for your contribution. And I really appreciate you.
Oh, thanks so much. Thanks for having me on the show, Michelle. It's, I told you I was kind of cutting back on summits, and when you called, I just couldn't resist. So, and I appreciate this opportunity because we got a chance to talk about, obviously, things that are, I think, very important. I hope to all of us.
Yeah, I think so too. So I know we've been talking about your energetic, am I saying it wrong?
Genetic energetics.
Genetic energetics. And I know that your free gift is related to this. It's part of your work. Share a little bit more about that with us.
So what we're giving people is an opportunity to find out what your genetic energetic profile is. So we call it a personal energetic profile. And it's really easy to do. It's going to take you only seconds. It's going to be a little mind-boggling because we only ask for a couple pieces of information. And the two pieces we ask for, one, you should know this, is your birth date. And it's not, we don't care about the time you were born or where you're born, just your actual birth date. And the other, if you have it, and hopefully you do, but it's not a huge deal if you don't, it's just an added plus if you do, is your biological parent's birth date. And by biological, I want you to, it's for a woman, it's your father's birth date, your biological father's birth date. And if you're a man, it's your mother's biological birth date. And this piece is going to do something that nothing else on this planet can do. And it's going to tell you about chemistry, why you have it, and who you're going to have it with. And that's a really, really big piece. We could do hours just talking about chemistry, Michelle. So it's going to tell you about your lifestyle traits, how you communicate, how you process information, the speed that you run your life, how you deal with money, your relationship, sexually, chemistry. And then there are up to 5 what we call personality modifiers. Some people have none. So if you find out you have none, that's not a negative thing. It's actually the best of all scenarios. So some people have none and some people have multiple. And these are insights into what we are characteristically at a genetic level that can explain things in the most profound way. For me, when I first learned it, it literally removed 30 years of guilt and shame in probably about 10 minutes, just with an understanding of something that I found out that was very true about myself that I never, ever looked at in the way it was shown to me. So this is our free gift. And if you don't, by the way, if you don't have your biological opposite gender parent's birthday, still do the profile and you'll get everything but the chemistry piece. And I promise you it will be profound. And if you have more questions, email us. We're happy to talk to you. We're happy to engage with you in any way that we can support your relationships.
Thank you so much, Larry. And for everyone watching or listening, the link to Larry's free gift is right below the video or the audio that you're watching or listening from. I know there's so much more to what Larry has to offer, and so I know you'll want to stay connected with him. And Larry, I really want to thank you once again, and I'm so glad that you couldn't resist my invitation.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And to all of you watching, we really appreciate your presence here. We honor you and send you love and blessings. Take care and bye-bye for now.